Environmental Solutions here in Ghana. He's the vice chair for GACO, the Ghana Alliance for Clean Cook Stoves. He's also the co-founder and president for Sustainable Energy Technologies, which is a clean cook stoves manufacturing and distribution company in Ghana. They do biomass gasifier stoves for pellets, for briquettes, and he just recently started working with Southline Coast Limited, which is a bioethanol company looking to catalyze the industry here in Ghana. And Segun Saxena is co-founder and chief innovation officer for KOKO Networks. Many of you have heard of KOKO today or prior to this. They have KOKO Fuel, a liquid bioethanol-based cooking fuel distributed through ATMs. KOKO Climate, which retails the emissions reductions generated from transitioning households, and KOKO Club, which is a direct-to-consumer retail technology platform operated with local shopkeepers. Segun oversees KOKO's manufacturing operations and KOKO Labs, which does R&D for next-generation solutions for sustainable cooking. So we have a highly qualified panel here to talk about biogas and bioethanol. I want to start with, just jump right in with some of the key innovations that have been helpful in scaling companies. So Segun, I'm going to have you start it off. You guys just hit the 600,000 household mark. Congratulations. You've been able to accomplish that in a relatively short amount of time. So talk about what some of those key innovations were that made you successful, and how do other companies apply some of those?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. So yes, we have been successful, I think, in the last couple of years, but it's been many years of work, and I think it's important to emphasize that. We started out our journey in 2014 with a period of about 3 or 4 years of just basic research, understanding how people cook, where the gaps are, where the opportunities are. And we weren't necessarily wedded to ethanol. Ethanol just emerged as the most attractive way we felt, and biofuel as a way to offer households a compelling, user-friendly, truly sustainable and affordable way to cook. That's how we came up with this. And when we looked at everything that was going on, we saw a number of challenges that would prevent scale. And so our innovations focused on that. And so the first innovation was, of course, to create an appliance, a cook stove, that really worked for households, right? There's a lot of products in the market that haven't gone through an adequate user-centric design process, and so we spent a lot of time and effort working on that part. But then how do you get the fuel, a biofuel? How do you produce it sustainably? How do you bring it all the way to where it needs to be, which is right around the corner from each consumer's household? That was the really thorny question, right? And so eventually we realized that one company alone cannot do that. So we need to create a partnership. And so today what we have, and what's really supported KOKO's growth, is that we have a partnership that consists of really 4 key actors, right? There is the shops that we have. You mentioned the network of shops. We have 1,600 shops around Kenya. These are independent, family-owned mom-and-pop shops that have decided to become KOKO agents, right? In them we deploy this dispensing machine. So that's one key partnership, is building that partnership with those shops. We've also partnered with the existing liquid fuels industry. So in Kenya, our partner is the Shell operator, Vivo Energy. So they're a really important partner to source the biofuel, bring it all the way to each of these dispensing machines. The third partner is the government of Kenya. That's extremely important. We're dealing with a regulated product. We need to make sure that the government is truly engaged and supportive and understands what we're doing. We don't ask for any subsidies, but we do need to work closely with the government. And then the fourth partner, which is really unusual to bring into this mix, is the carbon financing partners, right? Because what drives this model is the affordability of the cook stoves and the fuel. And for that, we need to have partners that really value the benefits that are being created from their carbon finance. And so what we've built is a platform. It's a technology-based platform that brings all of these actors together, and that's the innovations that have allowed us to scale. But it's taken quite a few years to build those partnerships and to build the technology. But now that we've been able to deploy it, we're able to see adoption and traction form very, very quickly because of these affordable price points, because of this really wide distribution network, and because each of these partnerships are capable of scaling on their own.
And Esther, maybe you can comment. You said yesterday that the country's growing, or the company is growing exponentially. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. You operate in a bit of a different context because you're primarily in rural areas where KOKO's in an urban setting right now.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for all being here, and I will say the same as Segun. It takes a lot of time. So Sistema Bio started in 2010 in Mexico, and today, 12 years later, we're in 4 continents with around 50,000 biodigesters installed around the world. And we have signed contracts and agreements in 2022, and we will do the same amount of biodigesters that we've done over 12 years in 1 year, next year. So it is exponential growth, and it has taken a lot of time to get there, and a lot of sweat and tears. But I think that the key factors for this growth have been really 3. One is product quality, having a high quality product that is resistant, lasts 20 years, but at the same time is very simple to install, simple to maintain, simple to ship all over the world. So we own our manufacturing, it's a patented technology, we own the design. But we've been able to now have 2 manufacturing plants, one in Mexico and one in India, and really manufacture this high quality product all over the world. As we know also in biogas, and that's the second key factor for growth, is that customers are seeing such a radical change in their day-to-day life, in their cooking habits. They become producers of their own fuel that they will then use to be cooking. So this requires a lot of training, a lot of capacity building, a lot of follow-up. So we are boots on the ground in the field with our customers, hand-holding them through the process of adoption. And the third one, again, similar to KOKO, is really the carbon financing. So on average, a biodigester, with all the service and financing included, would cost around $1,000. And with carbon credits, we're able to radically reduce the amount that the farmer has to pay for a biodigester, and therefore the return on investment and the payback time for the farmer is really, I mean, it's the most profitable investment in any asset that a farmer can do, because they have to pay in maybe 6 months or up to 2 years, but they will save money by producing their own fuel for more than 20 years.
Thanks. I think both of you touched on an important aspect, and I'm going to ask everybody to comment on it, and maybe you can even go into a little more specificity, but that's affordability. I think it really comes down to cost in a lot of situations. You can have a great fuel, you can have a great technology, but if it isn't affordable or it isn't close to a home, it's not used. And so how do you build into your business model those factors that make it affordable? So if you could talk about your specific business models and how those specifically address affordability.
Sure. I mean, I think I'll just come back to the manufacturing. So we try, all of our R&D, all of our product design goes to really reducing the cost and being as efficient as possible. So throughout the years, our core design of our product has remained the same, but some small components of it have continuously been improved and optimized to be able to put more biodigesters in a container, to install them a bit faster, and just to increase their lifespan. So that's the first one, really on manufacturing, unit cost, being efficient in the field and installations. The second one, in terms of affordability, is we've, from the very beginning when we started in Mexico, started offering financing to our customers. So on a sort of lease-to-own model, because we don't do pay-as-you-go, but we really look into a lot of detail at how much is this household spending every month on firewood, on charcoal, on LP gas, on chemical fertilizer. And then we've actually designed payment plans where the monthly repayment is slightly lower than what they used to spend. So even as the farmer repays their loan, they're already saving money. And once they're done with the loan, they still have at least 18 years of usability of their product. And lastly, carbon finance, but I won't go into detail on the carbon finance. You all know how this works. Just something to add here is that on top of carbon finance, we've been able to overlay health and gender impact bonds and other RBF programs. We're part of the RVO program for SDG 7. There's other RBFs that really help make our products more affordable that are out there for impact.
Yeah, maybe it is good to note a bit. So SMV is working in both Asia and Africa. Things that we have seen changing in the market over the years, if I can talk about that, are basically nearly all markets started with the fixed homes, with the built locally. I had a presentation yesterday where we said that the most popular models at present are between 4 and 6 metric meters, which is in fact already a changement, because in some markets, biodigesters, where I'm talking about, they started as very big systems to have a certain capacity of gas use for the family. Yet basically it's all about filling the system. So if you don't have the organic waste or the cow dung, you can have a huge biodigester that doesn't function. So I would say that is not an invention, but it's something that changed over the years, that the solution got better adapted to the client. Also making it more affordable, as a smaller biodigester might be more affordable already than a bigger solution. Depends on the situation, the location, the size, the model, and so on. So that's something that we've seen changing. We've also seen, in fact, prefabricated models coming in the market and now having a track record. So that's also something which is important and which is changing the sector, where we are also assisting the market development. Now, on the affordability, which is an important thing, I think it is important to realize that a biodigester is not only about cooking. We're here today at a Clean Cooking Forum, yet the most value of a biodigester is currently in the use of the fertilizer and the compost that comes out of the fertilizer. And we've seen several business models developed in that, like in Burkina Faso, where companies start to reduce the price and offering to take compost as payment for the biodigester. We've also seen coming the carbon credits, as have been mentioned before, in 2 different ways. Burkina Faso, where there's a government management program, and the government has a national program for the development of the sector, and they actually manage the carbon credits, and they guarantee the quality, do the follow-up, and thereby can reduce the price for the customer together with the enterprises in the field. Another model, well, that has already been explained, I think, by Systema Bio. And I would say a challenge for really further development is maybe a combination of both. So if we start to use carbon credits to also make it more affordable for the clients, there might be a balance between the company and the other parties involved to also make sure that the carbon credits that are sold are of sufficient quality and don't become a risk as such. So that's something that I would like to add. Thank you.
Lovens, do you want to comment on that? I think.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So Southline Coast started in Ghana by actually examining various business models that could be used to drive the market for a cook stove that was really not on the market, or if it came, some even that came in the market did not do well. So we examined a number of different models that will help us reach scale rapidly, and how can we bring in 10 to 100,000 stoves a year into the country. So what we did was, in understanding the various business models, we put ourselves in the shoes of the end users to understand, hey, where would they go buy stoves? You know, for the small shops, we have the supermarkets, we have the Ghanaian behavior we realized was more of, especially within the lower middle income to middle income households, are people who want to buy things also in installment, especially if you ask most, even among the teachers or the middle income who are also getting some payments in salaried workers and stuff. So we understood the payroll model, the sales outlets model, the sales agents business model, and a number of different models that were assessed that we can use to really rapidly scale. And we have identified some business models that we're scaling so as to reach access faster, and at the same time make the stoves affordable and fuels available. So these are the three issues we try to address with our business model. So currently we've piloted on the market. We have reached some scale that we are about to scale up in 2023. And within our pilots, we realized that a hub and spoke business model will be one that is going to be working well for us. So where we had the fuels available, and we have hubs in various communities and spokes within the connects, like the kerosene model. If you look at the kerosene model, even people were able to buy it in small quantities, and at the same time retailers buy it in bigger quantities. So we are doing that to make sure that we have hubs in each district with spokes in various sub-communities in every corner to have fuels available. And then we have our sales agents activating the market to be able to drive the market. So we have full accessibility within the shortest possible time. We've tested it, it's working with small shops and other things. Now, within the communities that we piloted, you could go small shops, you can have fuels everywhere. And then we have people who are using the stoves, and we have customers coming to buy back fuels now. And then we wanted to also look at affordability. So to be able to drive affordability, what we did was we realized that the culture is for imported stoves. Everybody knows that mostly the stoves are a bit more expensive, and then the end users feel a bit challenging buying it. So we provided opportunity to look at the niche market that have the ability and willingness to pay, and then be able to pay in installment over a 2 to 3 months period and get it done. And then at the same time, we also try to look at how we've made the fuel very accessible, so we could get at least the cost. So we have a fuel subscription model built into a payroll business model that helps to drive affordability, and that makes more end users able to get their stoves and pay over time in the shortest possible time, and at the same time be able to get the fuel readily available. Because with the ethanol stoves in the Ghanaian market where it's not really available, one major question is, where do I get a fuel to buy? And that is what Southline Coast has really worked on to be able to address through a vertical integration business model. So currently we have the Southline Coast farms that is doing about 8,000 hectares of commercialization of cassava farm so that we could use. We want to, in 2023, we have now the farms in place, and then we are now raising resources to invest in the 10 million liter distillery that we now raising funding for, so that we could get fuel availability at a lower cost and more affordable for the end user in country. And then get the stoves through the business model that I created. And we believe that with the models that we have put in place now to be able to get the market off the ground, in the coming year, we are ready to really run rapidly. And that is where that's how our business models have been so far. Yeah, thank you.
So you asked about affordability. What does affordability mean, right? We have our thoughts. Everyone has their thoughts. We asked the customers, right? And we tried to understand what does affordability mean for the customers we're focused on. And I think what we've learned is that there are three key things to affordability that's very relevant for cooking solutions. The first is, what is the upfront cost of the cooking solution, right? How much do I need to pay you today to get access to this solution? The second thing is, if I use your solution, how much am I spending, every month, right? And sometimes people think in terms of months, sometimes they don't. They think in terms of day or week. But on an ongoing basis, how much am I spending to use your cooking fuel solution? But then there's a third element that's really important, which is the bundle size. How much do I need to spend out of pocket every time I want to buy your solution, right? So with LPG, until the pay-as-you-go LPG, it was the cylinder size, right? I can't get less than that size. And so there are three aspects to affordability. And so from our perspective, we looked at each of those and we said, okay, we need a strategy to tick off boxes in each of those three areas. So upfront cost, what do we need to do? We want to have high quality, durable, safe products, so we can't decost that product too much. We also don't want to extend loans and have our customers become indebted to buy this product. So what can we do? So first of all, we have to look for efficiencies in manufacturing, right? So we've set up the largest ethanol cooking plant anywhere. We're increasing that in size significantly, and we're really squeezing that model so that we can make cook stoves very efficiently, right? It would be great to be able to make them close to the market and at small scale, but that adds cost, right? So we've had to centralize and really go for economics so that we can pass that on to customers. The second thing around upfront cost is, of course, the role of carbon finance, right? And so today in the Kenyan market, the KOKO 2-burner cooking stove solution is on sale for about $15 or $16. Right? But it costs us much, much more than that to produce it and to bring it to market. And that delta is covered by the value of carbon, so showing great additionality for the people that are actually buying that carbon. So that's how we deal with the upfront component. For the ongoing fuel, many, many aspects for how we do that. But the first thing is, we got rid of plastic bottling. Right? A lot of ethanol cooking fuel distribution models in the past used plastic bottles, the way water or Coca-Cola is distributed. That has environmental issues, but it also adds a lot of cost. Right? So we came up with this idea of an ATM machine. So when a customer buys a KOKO stove, they also get a refillable bottle that fits uniquely into the ATM machine, and that's how they get access to their fuel. That helps to bring costs down. The other thing around ongoing affordability is the partnership with a fuel company. Right? So the fossil fuel industry has spent billions of dollars building networks for distribution of liquid fuels, right? Wouldn't it be great if a renewable solution could take advantage of all of that infrastructure? Ethanol can do that. That was one of the reasons we really liked this fuel, right? So in a matter of weeks, we can convert the infrastructure that a liquid fuel distribution company has and make it fit for purpose for distributing ethanol. And that means no incremental investment required, which means that the cost per liter of fuel goes down. Right? So that's really important to get to the point at which using ethanol is cheaper. Today, it's about 30 to 40% cheaper than using charcoal in the Nairobi market. Right? That's what's driving customer adoption. The final part was about the bundle size, and that's really, really important, and that's where liquid fuel has a great advantage. Right? Today, our customers can buy any amount of fuel that they want in their canister, as little as 30 cents of fuel at a time, or they can buy up to 2.5 liters of fuel at a time, but they're going to be paying the same price per liter for the amount of fuel that they get. And that's truly unique. There are very few products or services available to our target households where they're paying the same amount regardless of the bundle size. And for us, it just seemed like the right thing to do.
Thanks for that. In addition to being affordable for consumers, it also has to be an economical process for the company or the organization. So maybe you can talk about the funding mechanisms that have helped you get started, what sort of financing has been useful. Okay, maybe you can talk about how SNV operates within that space as well.
Sure. I mean, I think at Systema Bio, we've received every possible type of financing that exists today, from grants to equity to any type of debt, and more recently also carbon and results-based financing mechanisms. So I think they're all relevant and all important at different stages of the company and for different aspects. We're in a pretty solid financial situation right now because we've just closed our Series B and now have a solid balance sheet, and we expect that we can grow and have all the working capital needed to accelerate our growth and the installation rate of biodigesters all over the world through mostly carbon financing and all the working capital that comes along with it. Maybe just a side note on financing, we all know that the process to register carbon credits is a long and tedious, and not only does it take time to register the carbon project, it then takes a lot of time until the actual carbon credits are actually paid, because the biodigester needs to be installed, it needs to be in service for 1 year, it needs to be audited, and so on. So there is a big need in the market for flexible and low-priced working capital funding so that we can actually have the cash up front to manufacture, to ship, to install, and to service the biodigester, make sure that the customer is happy for the 20 years to come. And then we can repay with carbon credits. So I think this is it already exists, but there can be better terms, there can be more patient capital, more concessional financing to really help the acceleration that can then be repaid with carbon financing as well.
Well, I think for SMV, being an NGO ourselves, but long time in the sector of the biodigesters, I cannot talk like Esther just did on all the importance for a company, but what we recently also saw in a survey is that access to financing is still something which is rather complicated. I'm still talking about the biodigester sector, where SMV is mostly in the early stages of market developments, saying that once the private sector really takes over, there are other instruments, climate funds and so on, that we also manage, but all that we do on the demand, the supply, enabling environment, and enabling environment also being access to financing, has often been with little enterprises. So there we basically have seen donor programs facilitating result-based financing for companies and those kind of instruments to help to kickstart the market. But that's intervening not only in financing, because like as I said, when you go into the market, already you lose a lot of money explaining to clients that a biodigester is something very useful. So there's also just some real field work to get to know the solution, to make the market for the compost grow, to enable the client to get the return on investment of his activity. As for the solution of the biodigester, it's not only the company installing, but it's also basically the client that becomes a productive user. That's what I believe, in fact, because every day you have to do the minimum of work to actually profit from your biodigester, which is something we tend to forget. But it is, in fact, a productive activity, and you do get a return on your investment as client as well. So, well, those are things which are important, working on the demand. With the supply, we mostly use result-based financing on our side, but other models and access to finance is necessary also to overcome the gap to get to the results, right? And thereafter the full enabling environment. So then it's not only about financing, but also about the whole tax regime in the country that becomes important. Yeah. I continue?
I go? All right, yes. For us, we have looked at our pilots, and our first roll-up has been very successful. And we currently raising financing at the moment to be able to set up the distillery, expand the farms. And our farms also, we work with mostly farmers who are using the regenerative approaches to the farming model. So we're looking for both funding for business model testing, business model scaling up, and then also funding for farming, the farm and the distillery. And also at the same time, we're looking out to be able to develop carbon finance facility for this integrated model that could help us to scale. So that's where we are with finance, and we're very much open to investors and talking to investors at the moment during this forum to be able to help us in our scale up. In our roll-up plan in the next few years, we want to be able to at least do about 10,000 a month. That means 12,000 a year in 2023 to 2025, and be able to roll it out in the next 2025 to 2030, scale it up more. Yeah, so that's what we plan to do.
And for us, I mentioned the long R&D time frame for our solution. I think we went probably 4 years with zero revenue. So as a technology company, that was a bit difficult to attract, initial stage financing, but we had good success with family offices. So individuals, families that had a background in this part of the world and understood the opportunity we were going after and were willing to back us. And that allowed us to really invest in proper technology development, as I mentioned. But once we started to, did our beta launch in Nairobi in 2017, we were able to demonstrate the potential, then we were able to start attracting a different type of capital, and that was more venture type capital in nature, not necessarily the venture capital funds, who again were looking for slightly a different profile of investment and definitely wanted to keep away from any kind of hardware. And in our business, there's a lot of unique hardware. But where we did find traction was local investors. So KOKO is one of these companies that has a pretty significant local investor base in the markets we operate in, particularly in East Africa. And that was highly unusual. And that just reflected the fact that the local capital understood what we were doing and saw tremendous commercial potential in it. And so that was very important for us. That really validated the approach we were taking. And then as we began the commercial launch in the last couple of years, we've had, of course, climate finance come in and really help to make the solution accessible to our customers. And then more recently, larger scale climate investments. So most recently, the Microsoft Climate Innovation Fund made their first investment in an African climate technology company with KOKO, and so we're starting to see much more global interest. So a range of different financing types, but unfortunately not a lot of local venture capital type financing, because much of that seems to prefer the apps and the other software-based, much faster and easier business models.
Yeah, and of course, once you get to a certain point and reach economies of scale, then other costs drop significantly and allow you to continue building and expanding. So that's very helpful as well. It's very difficult for startups to sometimes get to that point. You both also touched on partnerships, policy that's important to be supportive in expanding these efforts. So maybe you can talk about what you see as some of the most valuable policies and support that can be put in place in order to help support the expansion of these businesses.
Thanks. I mean, I think, alignment with local governments in the countries where we operate is very, very important. In Kenya, where I'm based, we're really privileged to have a government that prioritizes biogas and that understands how relevant it is for the overall development of the country to have a stronger agriculture, stronger farmers, and a healthier population through clean cooking, which is all achieved through the biodigesters. So we actually have a VAT exemption. We have an exemption on import tariffs, which have really helped us also reduce our price, and we've passed this on directly to our customers. Actually, during COVID, the government lifted this exemption, so in the middle of the COVID crisis, we had to increase our price, which was pretty tough. But then we lobbied actually together with KOKO, and we were able to receive it back and have immediately reduced our pricing. So I think this is part of the really effective policies. I think, again, in Kenya, there are other really relevant policies. There's a ban on cutting firewood, cutting trees for firewood. There's a ban on charcoal. But if you've ever been to Kenya, you will see that this is not implemented at all. So I think the call would rather be for, I guess, instead of additional policies, really focusing on implementing the ones that are there, because this would radically accelerate the uptake of biogas and of biofuels in general. So the more, and this is something we're seeing now, firewood, LP gas, charcoal are getting more and more expensive, harder and harder to find. And in a bad and good way, this increases our business case and it increases the urgency to shift to clean cooking fuels. In the case of biodigesters, it's the same for chemical fertilizer because the biodigester produces biogas and organic fertilizer. Prices of chemical fertilizers have almost doubled recently, making the business case to invest in a biodigester more and more appealing.
Well, if I have to mention, yesterday I gave a presentation and I presented the potential for biodigesters at 150 million, and we're only considering the countries where SMV intervenes, we realized about 968,000. So, I mean, there's a huge gap still to overcome to really accelerate. Now, what's important, I think you cannot work on supply as a company if the demand is not established. So on demand, like I said, the clients need to get to know the product, the profitability, both on biogas and use of the effluent, of the fertilizer. But the fertilizer, in fact, it can also be used for other things, right? It can be used to feed chicken. I mean, it's just a high value waste that's no longer really a waste. On the supply side, we need mostly to have companies taking quality very serious. If they're small, if they're big, but the quality of the systems needs to be guaranteed, the service after sales needs to be guaranteed. And there are countries that have started in the sector, and you look behind and you see that everything that has been realized is not really functional anymore. Because maybe the quality wasn't there, but often also as the choice, so the client did not really make a conscious choice for the system. So that's very important. And I would say also paying for the system is important. And then in a whole enabling environment, the government is necessary, I'd say, to really support the sector, to have a strategy on biofuels, not only on biogas, biodigesters, but also on ethanol, to be explicit about it and supportive about solutions that they want to further support, and thereby also enabling those that enter the market to have access to training, to financing, and so on. That's not only the government, but they do play an important role in setting the full ecosystem at place. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. So for us, the kind of policies and partnerships needed for us to be able to move forward. We know that Ghana has quite great policies for sustainable energy assets. We currently just almost finalizing or developed a clean cooking strategy, and national determined contributions to climate change also seeks to drive 2 million cook stoves by 2025. And Ghana's both the bioenergy policy. I know ECOWAS just finished developing bioenergy standards for ethanol, and we Southline Coast seek to locate ourselves within the ECOWAS region to be a major distributor of ethanol stoves and fuels within the country. So we see that Ghana seeks to move to cleaner fuels. And I think LPG has been identified to 50% of the population by 2030. And I think that ethanol plays the second key role, if even better to address the issues of indoor air pollution and stuff. Ethanol is one of the best, cleanest fuels that is available, and that are also very climate smart. So we looking forward to government policies also driving at least 10% of the population adopting cleaner ethanol stoves by 2030 by then. And the kind of partnerships we look for that could help us grow as a Southline Coast. As I already mentioned, we know that carbon finance play a very big role in being able to drive clean cooking access among especially those that need it most, the rural and peri-urban households. And in Ghana alone, according to a market study that we did, we have about 2.85 million households that are early adopters of cleaner cook stoves, and especially we've already understood the market that about 1.28 million, the middle to high income charcoal end users to switch. And also we have rural end users that also have almost more than 27% of the market, also willing and able and having the ability to switch to cleaner cook stoves. So we're targeting that market in Ghana and be able to drive assets. So carbon finance partnerships is one of the key role. Investors who will be able to support the financing of business models, scaling, and also investors also in regenerative farms that could help us grow, and the distillery. Because if we realize that if we are able to get that partnerships to install the distillery by next year, we will be able to drive down the price for the fuels for the end users, and with resources to drive the business models we've already identified for the stoves that help us to scale access, we'll be able to make sure fuels and stoves are readily available within the market for end users. And our pilots has given us success, and we know that the scale-up is ready. We've learned the lessons that make the scale-up easy to roll. And these partnerships are things ones that we need to be able to scale up quickly. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Just 2 points to add, I think, to the list mentioned here in terms of partnership with government. I think first thing is the importance of the government to help in setting standards, right, for new technology. That's very important. There's a big risk of substandard technologies and processes coming into play, which jeopardizes the sector as a whole, and of course has many significant safety considerations. So setting standards and doing that in a clear, fair, fairly rapid fashion would be great. The second thing the government can do, most of these markets, there's no subsidization required of urban markets, of urban households. So really all the government needs to do is level the playing field, right? So many fossil fuels today benefit from subsidy programs or cost containment programs or other programs that essentially give them a leg up. And when you introduce a new solution, you obviously can't avail of those benefits. And so VAT exemptions, import tariff exemptions, excise duties, a number of such schemes that are in place for fossil fuels, make it hard to compete on a fair basis. And so I think leveling the playing field is also a really important action that the government can do. A lot of the other things I think that companies can manage in terms of creating awareness, in terms of building infrastructure, all of those things. But leveling the playing field does require regulation, and setting standards does require regulation.
Thank you. Very valuable points. I also want to just mention the partnership that can exist between clean cooking companies, even if they're not from the same sector. Systema Bio and KOKO have petitioned together with the government of Kenya to enact some of these clean cooking policies or get them thinking about how do we make this fair? How do we put in a regulatory framework that is supportive of clean fuels? And so I think even if you're not in the same sector as someone, you can look at collaboration for some of those important policy changes. I want to be sensitive to questions in the audience. We're getting near the end of our time. So if you have a question, put your hand up. Someone will come over with a microphone and you can ask away.
Good evening. My name is KOKO Networks, and I'm from Italy, Africa. It's an organization that is focused on building capacity of local governments on sustainable energy or sustainable intervention. And I have a question for, is it Southline? Did he mention that his company is using cassava as the major source for his ethanol fuels? Because there's been a lot of debates around issues around food being used for biofuel. More so with food security in the West African region. I don't know whether that approach seems ideal. That's my first question. My second question is, I'm trying to get the title of the session, which is saying, Bridging the Urban and Rural Biofuel Divide. And the conversation is about very business as usual model, because if you are trying to introduce clean solutions for local, low-income, underserved communities, the approaches that I'm listening to doesn't sound like there's opportunities for young people to take advantage of. It sounds like innovations and technologies developed elsewhere and being introduced. Materials and fuels introduced from elsewhere and being introduced or being implemented within the context of the market. And the language is market, financing, doesn't seem to actually bring on board opportunities for people who are going to benefit besides the use of the technology. So, I mean, there's a question to the panel. If there's a bit of reflection on what biofuels actually mean for low-income earners or low-income communities, I'll be grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, we understand the challenges with food security, and we have identified various models that we're using to address that. I told you that we're doing more of a regenerative approach to our farming, integrating both agroforestry practices and others. We grow various crops that helps with the cassava. That helps to get, especially the outgrower scheme that we're using, that helps the farmers to be able to both have the cassava and other crops that they're using. And then at the same time, within our model, we not only also looking at the first generation, but also the second generation end-use cassava to be able to use to feed the distillery. We have markets, a learning curve that we're working with a local company that is already doing that with using the cassava for the distillery, for producing ethanol, that we're learning from that model to be able to ensure that our work doesn't affect the food security issues in the country, but rather promotes more, enhance more food security, job creation, because the question on the rural divide, we're ensuring that more young people are involved in a whole business value chain, and then with the sales outlets and the distribution channels that we have also to address that. So we have really looked at it very carefully, and we are adopting models that will ensure that our food security issues are not compromised at all. But then cassava, the variety, especially with the varieties that we're using, that and also mostly we're also looking at moving towards land reclamation areas. You know, currently there has been a big issue with galamsey in Ghana, and most of the lands have been laid bare with problems. So we're looking at restoring those lands with integrated farming, including cassava, that could be used as feedstock also for our activity, so that it doesn't affect our food security issues in the country. Thank you.
I think maybe just a small note on the rural-urban. I kind of agree with that. The biodigesters I've been talking about are mostly biodigesters used by households, which is mostly in the rural areas. So what we see in cities is that the access to the resources to fill, so to organic material to fill the biodigester is often limited. And then secondly, in some of the cities, clients might be tempted to start to use tap water, which is cleaned with chlorides, and we've basically already seen that that just kills the production of biogas, or at least to a high extent. So the biodigester solutions that I talked about are more small scale. What you see in cities, and you also see that in Ghana and Accra, and I think a new installation has been realized, that's more the medium large scale solutions, which is also more developing in Asia right now. So you see then maybe there's waste from markets on a higher level being collected, or there are companies that have important organic waste using that for biogas solution and distributing it in the city. So these are models that, that are seen at present. And during the latest status brief, we also see that explicitly Asian countries say that they see a lot of chances for the middle and high quantity biodigesters. So thereby we assume also that there are these kind of models being developed, whereas in most countries, not all of them in Africa, the biodigesters are mostly for urban use and used by households at present.
I think another part of that question too was in regard to local solutions and how those are these solutions actually impacting the people that are using them on all levels? And yesterday you talked about how your teams are constructed. So I'd love for you to touch on that.
Yeah, thanks. I was about to get there, but Seguna, I'll let you. So yeah, I think as Aukia mentioned, for a biodigester, you need access to organic waste, whether it's animal waste or other type of waste. So it's predominantly found in rural areas, but also in peri-urban and sometimes even urban, especially in India, for example, where a lot of people keep cows. We actually go from rural to very, very close to urban centers, and this is probably where I personally believe that different fuels are very complementary. So KOKO in Kenya probably reaches like the outer skirts of the towns where Sistema Bio starts having customers. So there's a really, really clear like different solutions for different places. Just in terms of our teams, all of our teams are local people from the community who are trusted in their community, whether they're sales agents or technicians. A lot of our employees are farmers themselves. A lot of them own their biodigester. So whether they're a sales agent or a technician or a loan officer, they really understand the technology and they understand the benefits, and they're able to really share the enthusiasm for biogas, which is a small natural miracle of transforming something smelly, considered as a waste, into a beautiful blue flame and a rich fertilizer. So yeah, we have teams that are local, and something that is really important to mention as well is we're a Mexican company. Mexico is a developing country, and I really am super proud that this is a South-South cooperation. I think we're probably the only Kenyan company that has Mexican headquarters. Same thing for India. We really operate all over developing countries, and this has been designed and created in Mexico, has then been adapted and scaled in Kenya and India. So it is a very local solution created by locals for locals. So, yeah.
Thanks. just to reflect a bit on that, that comment, the second part of it, I think, and thank you for making that, because we haven't really touched that much on the rural aspect. So from the perspective of ethanol, which is very much an urban solution, really important aspect of why ethanol and why ethanol at scale was that what we're trying to do is displace, deforestation-based charcoal. Now, deforestation-based charcoal is an important income stream, a livelihood source for people in rural areas. And that's well established and very clear when you spend time in that part of the world. The advantage with ethanol is that it can be produced locally, right? And so what essentially an ethanol for cooking business model is doing is transferring income from fast-growing areas of the economy, which are usually in the cities, right, and channeling that through to smallholder farmers to engage in a sustainable form of agriculture that ensures that every year they're able to get a yield in their sugarcane or whatever the crop is that they're using to produce ethanol, right? And so this transfer from a sustainable transfer from the urban areas to the rural areas is a really important benefit of this model, right? And many governments, particularly in Kenya, recognize that. And Kenya has put in place an ethanol cooking fuel master plan that recognizes this is a collaboration between the Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Agriculture, Environment, and so on, to ensure that these benefits flow properly. And as part of that, it's important to make sure that ethanol production is truly sustainable. Food versus fuel is very much an issue, but it's very local. It depends on the dynamics in that market, agroclimatic factors, and so on. And so it's important that the right policies are put in place to ensure that ethanol for cooking develops as an opportunity that is truly beneficial for rural areas and is also inclusive. And we've tried to do that with this large network of small shops, and of course many people that are involved in the production of feedstock material and the processing and the distribution of these products as well. So that point is really important, and it's one we hadn't covered, so thanks for bringing it up.
Just wanted to add one more thing.
We are up against time. Yeah, we are up against time. We'll take one more question, and then if you still have a question that didn't get answered, you can hunt our speakers down afterward and pick their brains. Just pick someone.
Hi, thanks so much for the presentation. I'm Leila Kwong. I'm a professor in public health from UC Berkeley, and we have some evidence from Nepal that households that have biogas digesters have increased rates of diarrhea among children because of potential pathogens that are not being fully treated in the biodigester system. So I completely agree that the system can be really useful for energy production and fertilizer, and I'm just wondering what steps you have for monitoring the systems over their 20-year lifetime, or training systems to make sure that they are consistently inactivating those pathogens before it's used as fertilizer.
I mean, Systema Bio doesn't operate in Nepal, so I would rather give this to SNV.
Okay, well, SNV, I think we were in Nepal from the 90s on about. I wasn't there. Sorry. But I think I started the intervention about saying how important it is to monitor the systems. And I think that actually the whole carbon system is very importantly helping us in that, because it obliges all of us to continuously monitor the full park of biodigesters. So I'm sorry to learn, let's discuss after, I would like to hear more. But yes, monitoring is important, and I think there more and more is being done on all levels to that extent.
Then maybe just to add very briefly, I've never heard of this before, but I'd be curious to learn more. Would we have like scientifically proven in terms of health benefits is that biogas and clean cooking saves lives? We've done very, very rigorous studies with women having air filters for 48 hours, and we've found that a biodigester saves years and years of life in women's life cooking with biogas versus charcoal and firewood. So if anything, it has very positive impacts on people's health and extends their life.
And that brings us to the end of our session. Thank you all for attending. Thank you to our speakers. I think we heard how have been able to hear about the patience it takes to get these businesses going. And then, you know, we have primarily an urban solution in bioethanol and a rural solution in biogas, but they're starting to merge together, starting to expand, and even have some collaboration and crossover in those peri-urban areas. And so, obviously, if you have questions that didn't get answered, please hunt these guys down. Thank you very much for your attention.